Thank you so much, Vicky. Let us get into it. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our guests for tonight, three incredible women. Katherine Bennell-Pegg is an Australian astronaut and is the Director of Space Technology at the Australian Space Agency. She's unlocking more pathways for Australians to be involved with human spaceflight and encouraging women and girls to pursue STEM careers. Next up, Xin Liu, an engineer and an artist. Xin is an artist in residence at SETI Institute and a founding Arts Curator in the Space Exploration Initiative at MIT Media Lab. Finally, we have our host for this evening, Jana Levin, who's the Clare Tower Professor of Physics and Astronomy at Columbia University. She's also the founding director of Science Studios at Pioneer Works, and I leave you to enjoy the conversation.
What a beautiful audience. This is so wonderful, and thank you for such a wonderful welcome to Sydney. As we get into this, you've heard kind of our formal bios, but I wanted to start with you, Xin. You've been the face of the festival with this fantastic photo from your work, and we'll talk about your work and when this was taken. How did you get into this? You know, before you became this artist with this resume and this bio, how did you get started in this? Where did you come from?
Wow, what a story.
You've got 1 minute.
All the amazing stories we just heard from Raven. But story short, that I was trained as an engineer, and growing up in China, I loved science, math, physics, chemistry. But then slowly through my education, I realized this separation in the traditional pedagogy, that I was trained to learn or understand the world in one way. And I just grew this curiosity about literature, about music, film, and then decided to take a gap year for my master's degree and study fine arts. It was very, very fortunate that my parents did not stop me from doing it, as I was promising them afterwards I would just go back to Google and work. But then that 2 year really opened up the way I can see the world, and I really want to continue, and I end up working and studying at MIT Media Lab, where it's really about interdisciplinary research, is about asking questions rather than learning a particular skill to just solve some existing problems in the world. So during that time, I developed this profound interest, I would say, about subjectivity and identity, but I approached it in a way thinking about systems, thinking about cognitive science. But I was an engineer, so I was creating feedback systems that kind of manipulating how we perceive our respiration, how we see things differently in VR, etc. And then slowly I realized space is this perfect context for us to reimagining what it means to be a human on the Earth. So that's kind of how I get there, and I think exactly where we're at with the new space age is the moment where art and science is able to answer some of those questions.
It's amazing. We're going to look at some of your work and how exactly that philosophy informs your work. And Katherine, you've actually trained to go to space. Let me get your hero picture up here. Tell us, before we get into who you are now and the influence that you're having now, which I've actually heard a lot of being in Australia in the past week. It's quite amazing the impact that it's already having. But what brought you here? How did you get here from a wee lass?
Well, it's great to be back in Sydney, because this is where I was born and grew up on the northern beaches. And I think what really sparked my curiosity for space was the clear night sky we had above us, and when I realized that some of those stars that I could see when, I lay down on the grass and got bindies on all over my shirt were planets waiting to be explored, and I wanted to explore them. So it was that sense of curiosity and adventure that drew me through. And then when I was at high school, I wrote on my Year 8 careers form, when we had 3 options what we wanted to be when we grow up. I just wrote astronaut on the top line. And my parents, my dad's here tonight, by the way, hi Dad. My parents then were good enough to to not patronize me, but to encourage me to go, what would that take? Probably hoping I'd see sense, but actually the 1998 internet was all right, and it told me that to be an astronaut, you can be a scientist, you can be an engineer, you can be a pilot, you can be a doctor, and you should have good expeditionary experience and do stuff like flying or scuba diving and live internationally, and that all sounded pretty great. So I became more stubborn to hold on to that dream and applied to study engineering and physics at university without entirely understanding what engineering was, just because the degree had the word space in the title, and I love space. And I'm so glad I did, because becoming a space engineer, which I've been now for about 15 years, has given me the most wonderful experiences. After my degree, I moved overseas because Australia didn't yet even have a space agency, let alone an astronaut program. And I got to work on some of the most exciting missions I could have ever hoped for. Things like the Orion vehicle taking people back to the moon, a new part of the space station that came from the first seed of an idea, measuring the Earth's ocean surface currents to help us understand our climate, and launching rockets from above the polar circle under the aurora. And after about 11 years overseas, the Australian Space Agency set up and started hiring technical management. And I thought I wasn't experienced enough, but I was sitting at home on maternity leave with my second kid and saw the ad on LinkedIn and said, I've got to throw my hat in the ring at least. And my husband, who's a space engineer, did too, and they took us both home to help to growing the Australian space sector. And then here it was a really wonderful transition from being one of many, many people building large, complex spacecraft to using our expertise and our creativity to help direct, what is the place for Australia in space? What are our unique value adds? What's our national identity? And got to technology scout across the country, and also help launch rockets from our outback. But then in 2022, I finally got my chance to apply to be an astronaut through the European Space Agency's program. Applied and got through, and here we are.
Well, it's amazing. We'll talk about your training more, but I want to note that you both have done, you in your training with ESA, European Space Agency, and you, Xin, self-motivated, have both trained in parabolic flights. I'm going to show a video, Xin, from one of your experiments in parabolic flights. Can you explain to us what's going on? Because most people think you can only experience weightlessness if you're far away from the Earth in space. You are not in space here. Can you explain to us what's going on in this video?
Yeah, so parabolic flight, as we know, is this particular flight mechanism that, as a plane, literally free fall from the sky, but because it has the velocity to go forward and it's also going down, so it's creating this beautiful parabolic arc in the sky. And of course, after about 15 seconds, it will go up to maintain its height. So that's that particular arc as the plane free fall, where everything falls in the plane. That's when you start to be able to experience that microgravity experience, microgravity environment. And for this project, I was a researcher back then at MIT. I was very interested in the human mobility and thinking about what is the most fundamental experience as a mammal on the Earth is essentially walking. And then this particular project, and I had a background in dance, so I was always thinking, what would be dance like in space? What would be our body like in space? Then I really clicked. I was like, wow, guess what? I'll be a spider woman. Because it makes sense. If you think about it, in space, you shoot your threads out, and there's a little point over there. You have your mass, you're still heavy. However, you are not weighted down by the gravity. So as long as you have some initial force, you should be able to pull yourself around. And I was like, that could be an interesting technology, but also could be a really interesting performance. So that's what I proposed, and that's what I did in this parabolic flight.
And you filmed this as part of your art experience, and did it change after you actually did the flight from your theory before going? What it would be like to be weightless, falling, literally you're falling out of the sky?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because before I took the flight, I was imagining the experience to pretty much like a superhero, as you can probably see here. However, in that moment, I did not fly. What happened is the ground beneath let me, the ground fall. And that's when I realized, physics. The gravity never disappears, no matter where you are. And for your reference, we're in space now. So what happens everywhere is us falling together with it. And that's very profound as a body experience, but also almost philosophical. It's not just to kind of be free of these forces and be this single individual superhuman, superwoman. It's actually allow yourself to fall from the world, along the world, and then become free. So that moment really become lots of the starting point for my art and for my performance. So that's a great question.
So Gaussian, because Einstein called this idea of weightlessness the happiest thought of his life when he realized that the experience of pure gravity was the feeling of falling weightlessly. It wasn't being heavy in your chair or on your feet. Katherine, you did a parabolic flight similarly, but for your training, and I have this wonderful video of you giving CPR to this poor dummy. That doesn't look easy. Well, before we get into the CPR practice, how was it for you to do this parabolic flight as training for space?
It was absolutely fantastic, and I echo your experiences about the floor falling away. It was a really magical moment where as the floor falls away, your smile just goes up, and for me, I couldn't wipe it off the whole time. I did my first parabolic flight campaign when I was an intern at NASA, and that was really a joy flight to experience it for the first time. And what really struck me was the urge that you have to swim, to kick, which we were instructed very strongly not to do before, because you can get someone in the face or in space a piece of equipment. So that was a conscious thought you had to keep in your mind. Also, we're instructed not to jump, because without gravity pulling you back down, you can hit your head pretty hard. So slow movements, really controlled movements were very, very important. As an astronaut, we did 2 parabolic flight campaigns as part of our class. I trained with 5 others. We're in a class called the Hoppers, that's the patch on my shoulder, and we went up with experienced European Space Agency astronauts to train us, and also the Japanese ASCANs, or those that were training to be astronauts like us. And the first flight we did was about movement, so we did things like crawl around the roof and in circles and manoeuvring in different ways and just getting used to the feeling. And the second flight we did was the flight that you see the video, and in that flight we had workstations to learn how to actually work functionally in microgravity, and it was really amazing to think that this in space quickly becomes a normal way of life. Your body adapts really incredibly quickly, and we could even see that as we trained. We had workstations like learning how to use a drill in space, because if you don't brace, you'll spin as the drill will, and that's not very productive, nor does it look very confident. So we had to manage that. Things like getting your feet into the foot restraints you use on a spacewalk. If you miss just by like a millimeter, the reaction and action forces will spin you up and your feet will end up on the roof, and it's really hard to correct. We moved along a rail with all the toolbox and everything floating behind us and all the tools for a spacewalk, and that would whack you in the back of the head if you didn't position it just right. And what you see here is me doing CPR on a dummy. There was actually a pressure sensor in there to make sure we were doing it deep enough, because it's really hard to get that sense of where you are in space. In microgravity, it's quite different. And if you do it normally, like we are there, it's far less effective, even though the back of my legs were strapped down, because just that action and reaction pushes you back and you can't get the force right on the patient. So you do a handstand on them and do squats on the roof. And it looks awkward, but it's actually far easier than normal CPR, because you've just got a linear force path. So that was an interesting experience that I hope never has to be used in space, but we're ready if it does.
It's amazing, because even in the International Space Station, we're under this illusion that they're so far from the Earth that they're floating without gravity, and that's completely false. If you stopped the International Space Station, right, which is going something like 17,000 miles, I'm sorry about the miles, apologies American, per hour, it would drop to the earth like a stone. That what they're doing is they're doing the same experiment you're doing, but as Xin said, they're going so fast that in their case they never have to go back up, they just keep clearing the horizon, but they're actually doing a similar kind of flight. It's amazing stuff. So Xin, this conversation is titled Bodies in Space, and your bodies were weightless for a few minutes at a time in the parabolic flights. But you weren't yet, I mean, we're all in space, technically, but you weren't yet in space as we mean it when we talk about it colloquially. But your tooth was. Can you tell us about your tooth?
Yes, so the tooth you see right here, that was my hand without the nails. That was a bottom wisdom tooth of mine. So after the parabolic flight experiment I did, I really want to test my theory again in actual space environment. And I was very fortunate to be able to do the experiment with the Blue Origin New Shepard system. And that was a 15-minute flight opportunity, but the size of the flight space was about the size of a microwave, and I couldn't squeeze myself into it. So I decided instead to build a robot to do this kind of shooting and rewinding mechanism, like remotely and controlled by robotic system. And then deep down, I'm an artist, and I think a lot about that experience. And this is really a robot that's meant to be almost like an avatar of myself in space. So it's very interesting that how I was in a simulated space environment, and I'm making a simulated me in the real space world. And then in order to kind of complete the ceremony, carrying the wonderful conversation we just heard earlier, that I decided to put part of me in there. And then that was during a time that I happened to had impacted tooth and had it extracted. And there is this cultural kind of story in Chinese, kind of partially tradition, but is really dependent on different families. But when a kid loses a tooth, if it's a top tooth, you bury it on the ground. If it's a bottom tooth, you toss it up high to the ceiling for good luck. So that's when I thought, wow, like the tooth is so perfect. It looks like a ceramic piece. It is like a fossil. I mean, technically in science, we also use teeth to identify individuals. So I really felt like that was what it meant to be. And then that's what I decided to do. I built this robot, and I carried my tooth and went to space.
Now, I have a slide that's slightly out of order here. Sorry, because we're going to show your voyage of your tooth to space, and you must be the luckiest girl from your province. We first met because you had this exhibition, and this was a slide from your exhibition at Pioneer Works in Brooklyn, where I'm director of sciences, and we're aspiring to put an observatory to look into space at the top. And this was part of your exhibition here, and I mention it because I love that we're having this sort of global relationship between institutes that are interested in science very seriously and also in art. And Powerhouse has been just an inspiration here. So I apologize, it's slightly out of order, that's my fault, but you actually put this on a spacecraft, the Blue Origin spacecraft.
Yes, so this particular image you're seeing here is the return vehicle. So on top of that, there was a little capsule, which was then already up there. This is the recyclable part of the vehicle, and it's a new Shepard system. And the tooth went beyond the karma line, which is 100 kilometers above the Earth, but did not enter orbit. So that's why it's only 15 minutes. It was such an incredible experience. And this is the moment actually that captured when the teeth in the robot was actually in space floating. It was really magnificent. I also almost died through that project.
So the carbon line is when the atmosphere begins to peter out. But in a sense that the Blue Origin space capsule was doing a very extreme version of the parabolic flights, in a way.
Yes.
Because they were not in orbit, as you said.
Exactly.
Katherine, your body hopes to go to space. For real. the whole body, not just your teeth, one hopes. Tell me about how Australia is fitting into this wider ambition, because for many years, the space program for human beings in space at least stalled. While there was all of this activity sending satellites, we have tens of thousands of satellites in space for telecommunication reasons, all kinds of reasons. Bodies were not going to space for a long time, but it feels like it's back. Can you tell me both about the return of people to space and in particular Australia's relationship to that return to space?
Yeah, human spaceflight is at a really exciting inflection point. It's a very exciting time to be a rookie, newly qualified astronaut because, you know, we're at the most productive time for the International Space Station, which up there is a beautiful science lab the size of a soccer field. The internal volume's like the passenger part of an A380, and it's doing incredible work. And that International Space Station has been continuously inhabited now for 23 years, but we didn't have, you know, the rate of flights that we expect to see in the future, so we're seeing a real acceleration. And there's also commercial space stations in development to replace the International Space Station, which will host government astronauts and also private astronauts, such as scientists from their institutions to do good work. And we're seeing humans go back to the moon on a program called Artemis, which is named for the twin sister of Apollo. And the objective of Artemis is first to get the first woman and person of colour to the moon, and also to go back to the moon, not to walk, but to work, to have a persistent presence and to do incredible science near the South Polar region, a large part of which can teach us about the Earth, because the moon is a great museum of solar system and early Earth history. The most accepted theory today of its formation was that it was made from a collision between a proto-Earth and a large body, and together it came together and the moon spun off and they both solidified. So because the Earth is a recycler, it has weathering, it has plate tectonics, we can't learn about its formation and its interior as much on Earth as we can from the moon. So that should give us greater inputs into things like climate change models, where geothermal inputs could be refined. So where's Australia fit in? Australia has a long and proud history in space, but you know, we've been there from the beginning. Most of us have probably seen the Dish movie. We were a huge part of the tracking stations, the communications, and we even had doctors in those stations to support astronauts. But we didn't really have an acceleration in our space capability until very recently. You know, with the advent of the miniaturization of electronics, humanity's been able to make satellites that are as small as lunchboxes, which has rapidly brought the cost down. The cost of accessing space has gone down. And what that meant is that Australian universities and startups had space within their reach. And they started developing incredible capability from the ground up, and they lobbied to have a space agency. International space agencies wanted a front door to work with Australia and access all of our ingenuity back home. So that's when the Australian Space Agency set up about 6 years ago on the back of that. And since then, there's been some really exciting programs and capabilities developed. Some you heard about earlier, but you know, one of them that really excites me is the rover that's going to the South Polar region of the moon, called Rover, named by the public. It's very cute, and it's small. It's 20 kilos, but that's going to be taking the best of all our autonomous systems from our mining and resources sector, not to mine the moon, but to create that systems of systems capability on the moon eventually, that we have as a world-leading capability in Australia. We can also bring capabilities like how we manage remote expeditioners in Antarctica, where we're world leaders in the volume of researchers that go there and the kind of healthcare we provide. The way that we manage our remote industries as well is a capability we bring to the table, our field robotics from our agriculture. So there's a lot of international interest to capture this, as well as the capabilities we already have from the space sector, like IoT, satellites from space, and communications. Where I'm at today, I have the honour of having graduated as the first qualified Australian astronaut, the first female Australian astronaut, and the first to wear this flag, which is incredible. But I stand on the shoulders of giants, of course. We've had Phil Chapman, who was selected in the Apollo era as an Australian representing the US. Unfortunately, he never flew, but his whole class didn't, not through no fault of his own. We had Paul Scully-Power from Sydney, who represented the US officially in space as an oceanographer on the shuttle in the 80s. We've had Andy Thomas, a very capable, very well decorated astronaut that flew in the late 90s and early 2000s. But one way to think of it is it's like Australia never entered the Olympics. You know, we've had great athletes play for other nations because there was no Australian team. But now we've, for the first time, got the chance to enter. And what that can do is bring with you the ecosystem. To extend the analogy, the athletes have coaches, you have physios, you have youth leagues, you have home games, and that whole ecosystem effect. There are scientists, our engineers, our educators, our artists, and the supply chain entry possibilities that come with that and the international relationship. So it's an exciting time. For me, there's no flight guaranteed. The Australian space sector is young, but step by step.
Now, you've trained in the air, but you've also trained underwater. This is a video of you training underwater. What's the difference between training in the air versus training underwater?
Well, underwater, we do training at the European Astronaut Centre and also in Houston because underwater is the best simulation we have for long bursts of microgravity without going to space. So in the planes, it might be 15 seconds in one of the zero-G planes or 22 seconds in another, and that's not long enough to practice spacewalks in their entirety. So astronauts train in deep pools. We start out in full face masks like that and progress to EVA suits, which are very hard work. You have to put on ice packs in like a chest harness afterwards to recover, and you're up and down there for 6 to 8 hours. And the difference is underwater that water is heavy, so it dampens your movements, so you feel in many ways a lot more controlled than you do in microgravity. That's why we were doing experiments in those workstations in the zero-G flight where we could lose control in a way that you wouldn't underwater. The other difference underwater is that inside the suit you still have gravity. So if you're upside down, you feel the suit on your shoulder. If you're on your belly, it's on your stomach, and that's why it's even harder work underwater, potentially, than in space, I'm told. So yeah, it was a fantastic part of the training, descending over a full-size mock-up of the International Space Station rather than a coral reef.
Now, Xin, you've also gone underwater, and I don't think people realize that wonderful shot of you that has been part of the cover of the Sydney Science Festival was done underwater. And this shot, I think it's a little more apparent that it's underwater. Why underwater for you as well? Was it the same thinking that you were thinking about how people train for microgravity?
Yeah, absolutely, because before my parabolic flight, I was just so excited. I had ballet experience, I'd always trained as rhythmic gymnastics, but I never was in microgravity, and I know underwater would be the best way to learn. And I tried quite a bit in the swimming pool back then, just, on the campus, but then I was talking to my friend, we're deep down artists, and then this is such an exciting opportunity, and we actually discussed earlier that in zero gravity flights is really amazing, but you only have 15 seconds, and then everyone is around you, it's chaotic, and in one plane you probably have 20 researchers doing different projects. It's literally all stationed around, and when it goes, everyone fly, and craziness all around you, and you go down. So in that process, you would personally feel a lot emotions and movements. However, it's really hard to capture a clean picture, and then you don't really have a good way to set it up, having a photo booth, etc. And for me, when I do projects, I really think about how to communicate. And I think in the arts, it's very important to bring out certain emotions, both for me to study and know what I am trying to say with my work, but also to be able to connect immediately with the audience. So I didn't want the work to look like a research. I want something a little bit more wondrous. So this series of picture was done in a very hacker-ish, low-budget way that back then I was still a student, so I rented out the campus swimming pool, and I bought this gigantic, the biggest black cloth I could afford, and I washed it in the hot water washing machine for like 5 times because I was worried it's gonna taint the water. And then I dumped the entire fabric into the school swimming pool and got a friend of mine, and we're like, let's go. So basically, both of us just like for the first time trying to do all the flippings and running around and taking pictures. And then, you know, what's the biggest problem then is that my eyes were closed because there's so much chlorine. And then he's like, it doesn't look like you're enjoying yourself and floating in space. And I was like, well, I don't know, like how do people open their eyes in a swimming pool? And he was like, well, I guess you just open it. So for the entire duration of about like 4 hours, I was going down, open my eyes, and trying to look as graceful as I can and come up. Everything was like a disaster. I had to wash my eye with like, you know, eye drops and then rest a little bit and rest and go down again, repeat. And then that's how we got those pictures.
Sounds like fun. You know, the theme of this entire Sydney Science Festival is a subset of the National Science Week, is to think about the Earth from the perspective of space. And I believe that you both do that. Katherine, maybe I'll start with you. I know you want to go to space and you want to explore, but you're also thinking about the implications for Earth and how our space exploration can help us reflect on what's happening here on Earth. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that's changed your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a famous quote that says, we went to explore the moon and instead we discovered the Earth. Many of you might be familiar with the Earthrise photo, which is one of the first images taken of Earth from the lunar region when the Apollo 8 astronauts went back around the moon. And it's credited with, you know, really driving forward the environmental movement of the early 70s because the profound impact it had for so many people to see the Earth as a singular marvel where, you know, all of life's moments and all of our history and everything that we know of that's ever lived and everything that is living right now it's like, hello, all of my 7 billion friends on that one dot. And a lot of astronauts, when they go to space, really do feel that overview effect. The International Space Station is the main home of astronauts in orbit today. And on the bottom, there's a cupola, which is a dome. And a lot of astronauts like to hang out there and look at the Earth. One of my colleagues who recently went into space, he's a very tough test pilot kind of guy. And he said when he first looked at the Earth from space, he's like, oh, that's nice. But, you know, he had a checklist to move through. It didn't really affect him. And a few days later, he had some time to himself and went and looked out the cupola and got quite emotional, and he realised he was crying, you know, and it was quite amazing to him, and he couldn't put it into words why. And it's often described that, you know, from space, you can't see borders between countries. You can see how something happening in one region, like bushfires, put smoke over another. You can see pollution plumes around the world. You can see weather and events like volcanic eruptions. And particularly, you can see the thin blue line of atmosphere that's just very, very thin when the light comes around the Earth in a sunrise or goes down in a sunset. And a lot of astronauts come back quite impacted by that and wanting to discuss on Earth how we can best look after our environment. But in space, it goes beyond that. As astronauts, we take photos for science and for monitoring our planet to help with that effort. And also on the space station, we are involved in lots of experiments, like to develop new materials like lower carbon dioxide emitting cement, or to understand fluid flows better, like how magma works beneath our crust, input into climate change models, and looking further afield at satellites, which can also be launched from the International Space Station when they're small. Satellites are absolutely critical to understanding the environment. There are 55 essential environmental variables we have to monitor globally that the UN is part of tracking. and more than half of them can only be monitored in a continuous and a precise manner through satellites in space. So it's really important to me and to all the other astronauts, the role we play there and the honour that it is to be part of that.
Now, Xin, you and I have spoken just recently as friends about some of these campaigns. And sorry, my video is not working. I'm gonna try it again. You guys don't mind a little technical problems, do you? We've talked about terraforming Mars and that ambition and the realism of that ambition, but also, shouldn't we just be thinking about the Earth? And I'm wondering, as an artist, when you're exploring some of these ideas, where you fall on the relationship, the spectrum between exploration and preservation.
Such a good question, and I have kind of two ways to answer. One, I think is a bit personal, because when I finished Living Distance, which is the title of the Tooth project, I developed a 2-channel video, and I shared it with many audiences through my exhibitions. And then afterwards, one of my friends, who's also an art historian, came to me, and she told me that she saw a very strong sense of homesickness in that video, because I grew up in the north part of China. It's a lot of desert. So the landscape is very similar, likely, to where the rocket was launched. And then I started thinking about that comment for a couple years. And I really felt like this similar trajectory. For myself, I grew up in a small town, and I went to a bigger city for education, went to another country for further education, and now living in London for family and work. So I keep moving forward for more opportunity, for more growth. I see many people, I meet friends, but then every time when you move forward, there's something you're left behind. And I think that is something really profound as we are understanding humanity's desire to leave the Earth. I think you're right. When we arrive at the moon, we're gonna realize what we are as an Earth being, just like me. Like every time I leave home, I realized I miss some taste, I miss a certain voice. I actually met my high school friend here in Sydney after 10 years, and then we just go right back. So that's something I think we would never be able to just strip away and become a new species. On the more practical side of things, I think there's many conversations that we are having and should be having more around space exploration, in the sense that how we should also view the Earth as a spaceship. I think this is a shared conversation among many in our industry, is that when we go to an International Space Station, we really are careful about everyone, extraordinary people we're bringing up there. Every single material, every single kilogram is like important asset and resource, and we cherish them when we're trying to do experiment and study up there. But then, if you think about it, Earth is almost uniquely in the same way as a material closed system. That we don't really get new stuff from Jupiter or Mars, like just payload resupply. This is all we got. And then, so in the similar way, like I actually did a research project in 2020 with National Renewable Laboratory about plastic degradation. And we're studying plastic degradation bacteria in space because we know the importance of reusing materials out there, but it's the same thing here. So I think there's a lot of conversation we should be having and allowing people to realize we're living on a planet is as precious as a space station, and every single person be able to even realize, I think it's just a miracle.
How do you, I think Xin's response is itself a question, and Katherine, I wonder, how do you think we can have that global consciousness about a kind of balance between exploration and preservation? How is it that we can do that from the perspective of explorers?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question to reflect on. I don't think there's a conflict necessarily between exploration and preservation. I think they go hand in hand. Like as Xin said, that we can reflect on what exploration teaches us about the Earth. When we're looking at developing missions to Mars, there's a trade-off often in the philosophy of how we approach life support. Do we go for a closed-loop system, which, if it works, is the best system because it means you don't need resupply missions, you recycle everything on board, whether that's food, you grow your own food, you reuse everything in like the water in the air to drink again. Yesterday's coffee becomes tomorrow's coffee, which it already does on the space station, and so on. But the other end of that spectrum that you're trading off against is a mission where you rely on everything from Earth. And that is the safest approach because you never run out. You've always got that lifeline, and we don't have that on Earth. And it's interesting because as an astronaut, I'm like, oh my goodness, closed loop supply. What if you're around Mars and something goes wrong? But that's exactly what we have on Earth. So yeah, it helps us to reflect on that, and also astronauts have a role to explain the importance of Earth as we see it from space.
Katherine, I want to ask you, this is my closing question for you and then for Xin, which is, what's next, both for you and your aspiration for this entire campaign to go to space?
So I've just finished astronaut training, which means I've gone from being a selected ASCAN to astronaut, ready for missions to the space station or even beyond, for example, to the moon, which is very exciting, very pinch me stuff. My focus right now though is on the ground. So I've just got back to Australia a few weeks ago, getting out for National Science Week and helping to foster STEM inspiration and curiosity in everyone, but particularly young people, and even beyond that, helping young people to dream big for themselves, no matter what their dreams may be. And it's an honour to be able to be part of that. I've also got the role to connect Australian researchers and those in other pursuits to those internationally to help Australians in general be more involved in human spaceflight. We've got a lot of great science, for example, that could be put into in-space labs to help us with breakthroughs in biotech, in AI, in robotics, and in many other fields. Should I go to space? We will see. Australia is just at the beginning of its journey, and step by step.
And what would it take for that to become a reality for you as an Australian, to go to space and wear the flag, be the first astronaut to wear the flag? What would it take for that to happen? Is it just a financial barrier?
The way that astronaut flights are organised today is that countries invest in their sector. For example, Canada invests in the Canadian industry to provide the Canadian arm to the space station, and astronaut flights come with it. So it's a pipeline program of capability. But there's lots of new ways to do it too. There's more commercial paths to space that governments are partaking in as well. So, should one day I be fortunate enough to sit on that rocket, that would mean that Australia's space program has gone through an incredible maturation, and that there's been a whole Team Australia ecosystem effect. And it would be really an honour and a huge pride to do that as part of a large team on the ground. But yeah, let's see what the future holds. Some astronauts wait a long time and some don't go at all, but I cross my fingers and I'll see.
And Xin, for you, what's next, both in your art and I know you can't have a concrete answer to that because art is about exploration, but what are you hoping for the future?
Yeah, I think now I'm really hoping to write a book. Oh my God, I'm like planting a flag on the
now you
stage
got
right now. So I've been really thinking deeply around this idea of cosmic metabolism, and really kind of start from the moment when I realized that gravity felt with that entire experience as I felt with gravity. And as well as the entire journey around transformation as you're going into different worlds, you'll shed your life behind you. And the material science work I was doing was plastic degradation. So I really want to dedicate a couple years to think about the idea how degradation, how even death is really part of the progress, part of life, that we need to accept that. We need to face the problems, face the waste, face the things that doesn't look so pretty, but really honor them, and then be able to live with it, and then see the beauty coming out of it. So that's really a research I want to work on with lots of different support at museum. It could be a series of exhibitions and then some writings. But in the meantime, I'm very devoted to STEM education, and here actually from RISD we call it STEAM, so STEAM, so add A into STEM, meaning like arts and sciences. And I think it's really, really important nowadays that we're not only looking at technology, engineering, but also thinking about culture. Because fundamentally, I believe that technological questions are often becoming a cultural questions, and we are needing a larger, more open conversation in society to allow that conversation to happen. And then pedagogy and collaboration is really fundamental to that. So I'm working with a few institutions to allow or open some opportunities for artists to enter that conversation.
I really thank you both so much for giving us really a lot to think about, not just what's happened, what you've done, but also how collectively we're going to move into this very exciting and also, somewhat precarious future. Please join me in thanking Xin and Katherine for wonderful conversation. I'm sorry there's no Q&A, so we're just going to leave the stage, but thank you so much for coming.